Hello, this is your invitation to check out a few notes on classroom management for K to 12 substitute teachers. Even an experienced substitute teacher can struggle with classroom management. We hope to make it a little easier with these notes featuring three key aspects. You're welcome to download this slide deck and keep it as a reference. Just jot down this link bit.ly/capital NKCES lowercase manage. And that's going to take you directly to these slides, and there's lots of useful links throughout. There's a very popular book by Harry Wong called The First Days of School. And in that book, he explains that effective teachers manage their classrooms, while ineffective teachers discipline their classrooms. And the same can be said for substitute teachers. So let's look at the difference that Harry Wong was referring to. Those who manage their class take a proactive approach to helping students make good choices and focus on their important academic work. Those who focus on discipline take more of a reactive approach. They might wait for students to make a poor decision and then assign a consequence. The thinking in this reactive approach is that the consequence that's doled out will cause the student to keep from making that same choice in the future. Unfortunately, we know that that rarely works. So, I'd like to share with you how to be proactive as a substitute teacher when it comes to managing a classroom full of students. My first recommendation for being proactive with classroom management is to build relationships. Personal relationship building is actually the foundation of classroom management. It's human nature that people will work harder and strive to please those who they care about and who they know believe and care about them. So, for substitute teachers, building relationships in a short amount of time can be challenging. So, here's a few notes on how you can do this. Dress professionally. How you dress matters. If your clothing shows that you're serious about your position as their teacher, students pick up on this. The way you dress can affect how you're perceived by students. So it's best to dress in, I would say, business casual attire. Now, you can look up business casual and find a variety of different opinions on what this means, but generally, appropriate business casual dress includes the following. You also want to be aware of any dress codes that are in place at the school or the schools that you'll be serving. And dressing professionally is relevant whether you're teaching in person or teaching virtually. Another act that can help you build relationships is to use humor. Substitute teachers who manage classrooms successfully take their jobs seriously, but don't take themselves quite so seriously. Now, certainly, this doesn't mean that you turn the class into a circus show, but interjecting the day with humor and laughter is a wonderful way to not only enjoy the day, but help build those relationships and thus help you proactively manage the classroom. And if this isn't something that you feel comes very naturally to you, here's some tips. Do your research. Before you sub for a particular age group, take some time to research pop culture topics relevant to these students. Watch a few minutes of Disney Channel, check out some online forums, or ask family and friends with this age of child. Find out what these students might relate to or think is funny. Make sure it's age appropriate. SpongeBob SquarePants references might not fly with 12th graders. Have a few jokes or a few memes on hand. It's okay to jot them down to help you remember, and you could just subtly refer to them at the appropriate moment. Stick a few printouts of funny memes in your notebook and have them ready to display, or save them on your computer to share if you're teaching digitally. These can be used during your introduction, during transition, or to diffuse an uncomfortable moment. And laugh at your mistakes. If you do something silly or do something incorrectly, don't try to cover it up. Mention it, own it, laugh about it. Just remember to always target yourself, never target your students. So, I've linked here in this picture a short blog post from author Dave Stewart Jr., where he talks about the how and why to use humor in your classroom. Now, one note about humor when building relationships is that it should never include sarcasm, nor does that mean making jokes at a student's expense. Humor should heal, not hurt. It should never be sarcastic, cruel, embarrassing, or disrespectful. And this actually leads to my third tip on how to build relationships, even in the short term. And that's to show respect. Every relationship relies on mutual respect, and a teacher student relationship is no exception. There are going to be times when student behavior is going to frustrate you terribly. When this happens, think about how you would want your own children, your nieces, your nephews, or the like to be treated in school by their teachers. Students will never respect you if you do not respect them. So you should never yell, single a student out, or embarrass them. And try to learn individual names if you can, especially if you'll be subbing in a classroom for several days. This can make students feel seen, known, and it can also make them feel more accountable for their behavior. Another way substitute teachers can build relationships is to be real. There is no need to be robotic or excessively formal. Show the class the real you. Young people of all ages appreciate individuality, and they will respect a substitute that doesn't put on airs, but one whose character shines through. And be real when it comes to your areas of expertise. If you aren't an algebra whiz or you haven't read a piece of British literature in ages, just be honest about that with the class. Tell them that you'll try your best and that you're excited to learn with them. And it's okay to share some of your out of school life. When it's appropriate and if it fits the situation, talk to them about your hobbies, your pets, your favorite foods. Students may find out that they have some things in common with you. And this is achievable in real life and in online classrooms. If you're interested in diving deeper into this idea, I encourage you to check out the book Be Real, Educate from the Heart by Tara Martin. I've linked it here for you. And one last tip on building relationships to be proactive with classroom management is to ask check-in questions. As a substitute teacher, you may not always be familiar with the content or know what content-related questions to ask, but you can certainly ask check-in questions throughout a lesson, such as, "Tell me what you all came up with for number 1," or "How is your group doing with this section?" Or "It looks like you haven't started yet. Is there anything I can do to help?" Or "How do you think you're doing so far with this activity?" These interactions can greatly impact student behavior. Students who were off task might feel more motivated to get back to work. Students who were reluctant to come ask you for clarification may do so. These questions could also assist students who may be easily distracted to rein in their focus. So let's head to the next tab in these notes on classroom management. As a substitute teacher entering a previously established environment, you are a new situation for these young people. Students naturally want to test the waters and see what they can get away with. That's why it's important when it comes to classroom management to clearly communicate your expectations. Students cannot meet expectations that have not been shared with them. I'm sure you have your own ideas in your mind about what should happen in the classroom that day. The problem is, each of the students also has an idea in their mind as well, and there's an obvious disconnect there. As the substitute teacher, you may or may not be privy to the classroom teacher's expectations. So it's important to have clear in your mind what yours are and share them with the students. This should be done right away after introducing yourself. If you're working with elementary age students, do this right at the beginning of the day. But you would also want to revisit those expectations periodically, especially when returning to the classroom from a special area class, from lunch, or anything of that nature. If you're working in a secondary classroom, this will mean that you will introduce yourself and state your expectations at the beginning of each class period. And these expectations should be shared explicitly in a kind but confident tone with very explicit details. We don't want to assume that students already know. If you do know the classroom teacher's rules or expectations, it's important to maintain those, but it's also important to still go over them in the same manner. That way, there's no gray area about what you know and what the students know is expected of them. And know that consistency is the key here. If you provide a consequence for one student who broke a rule on not running, for example, you need to do so for any other student who breaks it. Otherwise, you run the risk of appearing as though you're playing favorites, which can quickly discount you in the student's eyes. So keep your stated expectations to a minimum of 4 or 5 generalities that you absolutely expect while you're there. Expectations should be stated in a positive manner. Don't just make a list of don'ts. Here, for example, is some expectations that might be appropriate for an upper, middle, or high school classroom. Okay, let's head to the next tab in our notes. My third recommendation for being proactive with classroom management is to make good use of time and space. One way to do that is with proximity. This means being physically close or near to your students many times throughout the day. A substitute teacher with effective classroom management is always moving, circulating around the classroom, being present in the moment. It may be tempting to sit at your desk, check your messages, or study the next lesson, but that's actually an invitation to your students to get distracted, to get off task, or to be mischievous. So be active. This provides a wonderful opportunity for those check in questions that we talked about earlier. This strategy, unfortunately, doesn't translate well to a virtual classroom. So use this when you're teaching in person. I've linked here in the photo an article from TeachHub with more benefits and how to's with the use of proximity. Another way to make good use of time and space is to greet students at the door. If you're in an elementary level class, start the day this way. If you're in a secondary class, start each period at the door. This helps set a positive tone for the rest of the class period and can reduce disruptive behavior. Try to do the following. I've linked here in this second picture an article from Edutopia summarizing the results of a 2018 study on this if you're interested in learning more. One more tip on making good use of time and space in order to be proactive with classroom management is to have a just in case plan ready. You always want to follow the plan that the classroom teacher has left for you as much as humanly possible. However, there may be times when something doesn't take as long as the classroom teacher anticipated, or perhaps there was an emergency and the classroom teacher wasn't able to leave a plan at all. There are situations where you will be glad you had something to pull from that you're familiar with, because an idle class is ripe for disruption. This doesn't have to be anything formal. It could be a game, a writing assignment, a read aloud. Check out the session titled What to Do If You Have Extra Time for some more specifics on what this could look like. Besides some instructional activities, it's also a good idea to carry extra paper, pencils, post-its, paper clips, pens, band-aids. In some classrooms, these supplies may not be readily available or they might not be in an obvious placement. So have your own stash on hand. That can save you some of that idle time searching for it. Linked in this third picture is an article from Swing Education with some recommendations. Your act of service as a substitute teacher is valued and appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's a wrap on a few notes on classroom management for K-12 substitute teachers. If you have downloaded these slides, go ahead and click on the link here at the top of your slide deck. If not, just simply jot this down, bit.ly/capital NKCES, lowercase manage quiz. Type that into your browser and it's going to take you to a self-assessment to check your understanding of this session. A certificate of completion will be emailed to you when you get 80% of the answers correct.